An illustrated trip through St. Louis's past. That's next on City Corner. I'm Steve Potter, and welcome to City Corner. Marilynne Bradley is an artist who spent decades capturing St. Louis in watercolors, and this new book, Once Upon a Time in St. Louis, An Illustrated Trip Through the Past, is her latest endeavor. Marilynne, welcome to the program.
Thank you very much.
You worked with another gentleman on this, and the gentleman wrote the text, and it's your artwork. I think it's 86 individual paintings, but this is really sort of the culmination of or the final product of many years of work.
Right. I've been painting for over 50 years, started in the 60s. I've been very interested in St. Louis history, and I've recorded just about everything that's happened. So believe it or not, I'm old enough to know some of these places I've painted.
Yeah, I was interested in looking through them. A lot of them I recognize, but there are a few, I have to admit, that were new to me.
Ah.
Yeah. So you actually, are some of these paintings, they're not 50 years old, are they?
Yes.
No kidding.
I'm showing this because this is the way I used to paint in the 1960s. This was Handel's market at the time. All right, this is the way I paint now. Maybe I should put it this way.
Let me hold it up next to it.
Okay, so you can see the difference?
The larger one, the more recent one, is much more impressionistic, if that's the right way to put it.
Yes, and it has a lot more detail in it, whereas when I first started painting, I really didn't know how to paint very well, but I was very good at drafting. So I would outline everything in India ink. The line held everything together. The paint was secondary. And because this is so old, even the colors have faded a little bit. But I had to keep it just to show how I used to paint. And in those days, well, the way I used to sign, my name is just hidden right here. I didn't want anybody to know that I was a woman.
No kidding, why is that?
Well, I was in advertising, and I could get more jobs if they didn't know, and they never talked to me. I went through other various ways of getting jobs.
Wow, times have changed.
Yes.
For the better, I would say.
So it's sort of like Mad Men.
Yeah.
But I've just evolved where this is my kind of painting. I wasn't taught how to watercolor. It wasn't important during the 50s. Gee whiz, the 50s, when I was at Washington University. Instead, it was considered a way to sketch something for later on when you're going to paint it in oils. In fact, in those days, there weren't any acrylics.
Are you kidding?
No. Leonard Boucour was the first one to start putting the acrylics into the tubes, and I happened to know him. And he gave me the first set so I could try them out to see how they would work. So that's how far back I go.
Well, I was a budding artist when I was young, and I studied in acrylics. So maybe I should know this. So acrylics and watercolor, they're sort of the same thing, aren't they?
Not quite. Acrylics is more of a synthetic. It dries much faster. It's a heavier weight. You can make it thicker so it looks like oil. Actually, acrylics is somewhere in between watercolor and oils. A lot of people don't like it because they don't know how to use it. They feel that when you mix the color, it becomes muddy and gray. But there's ways of working with acrylic that you can make it as brilliant as ever.
Well, let's look at some of these iconic places from your book, and we have images that if you just take a look at the screen when they come up, we'll talk about that. And this first one is one of my favorite St. Louis landmarks, and that's the Eads Bridge down on the riverfront.
Yes. Isn't this unique? It's in the wintertime, and you also see the Admiral, which is now gone, and the arch is in the arch of the Eads Bridge.
So when you do this or any others, do you actually go on site? Do you take a photograph, or do you go down there and sit there?
Well, as you can see, it's in the winter, so I won't stay there very long. What I do is I take a lot of pictures. In fact, if you are at that point, you won't see the arch through that arch. So that's invented and moved a little bit. And that's the nice thing about working from many various sources that you can add that in.
So what's your philosophy when you change it a little something? You know, how much artistic license do you think is okay?
As much as you want.
Is that right?
Yes.
Let's look at the next one. And for anyone that loves antiques, they'll know
Okay,
this.
this is Rothschild's that used to be on McPherson and Euclid. I loved it. That was the best place to find the most unique pieces of whatever you wanted, especially for presents. So that was my photo, well, not my photo, my painting, and I painted that for David Richardson, who was the manager for the Rothschilds.
It's beautiful. Let's look at this next one, and I think I know where this is. Would that be on Vandeventer, just right outside of St. Louis?
Isn't that wonderful?
They're redoing this building right now, aren't they?
I don't know.
If it's the one I think it is.
It's been sitting there for so long, and it's right on the edge of St. Louis U.
It's on the west side of Vandeventer, just north of Forest Park Parkway.
Right, right. The architecture is just beautiful. Thank goodness they haven't knocked this one down.
I think it came close to that, but like I said, they're refurbishing it. I think
Good,
St. Louis U might actually
For a while,
own
it had a lot of bars in it, and you can understand why it's near St. Louis U. And it's close to Spring, too, because Spring had quite a few restaurants and bars there, too.
Marilynne, how do you decide what's interesting to paint for you, just personally?
A lot of it is the architecture itself, the story behind it. Many times is if I know it's going to be torn down or closed, I'll quickly do a painting of it.
That's one point. Almost everything in this book, and I think there are 86 images, almost everything that's in the book is not here any longer.
That's right.
That makes it kind of
So
special.
it's my way of preserving the past.
Let's look at this next one. This is one thing. The building certainly is still here, and that's the Anheuser-Busch Brewery, which is, I guess it's technically in Soulard or just south of Soulard?
Well, it's south of Soulard.
Yeah.
I did this because it's the old section of the brewery, and especially the entryway where you have the huge eagle, and you still have the clock tower, and the clock tower is probably iconic for the old brewery part.
Let's look at the next one. And who has not heard of the Coral Court Motel? There was even a little documentary film made about that sometime
This
ago.
was one of my first paintings that I did that had to do with St. Louis architecture. In fact, though I didn't know how to paint trees, I could just make lines. I was afraid of the leaf section. But what was so funny was on the marquee, I left an empty space, and I was selling prints of this, and people would ask me to put their name in it for their anniversary. So it made it very special for them when they had a pick.
Maybe we should say for the people that aren't familiar what we're talking about, this was sort of a no-tell motel.
That's
Had
right.
quite a, should I say, seedy reputation over the years?
Right, and it was also had to do with the Greenleys kidnapping. There was a
Right. Bobby Greensleaf? Or?
Yes.
Yeah.
So they stayed there for a while in the motel.
Let's look at some more work that you brought with
Okay.
us. Brought with you today.
This particular is the old rock house that was down in on the levee.
Down where this was taken down when they
Yes.
tore down a lot of the buildings for the arch grounds.
Right.
Yeah.
They saved 19 of the stones, and at one time they were going to recreate it. Now the stones are in the basement of the old courthouse. But this was the first stone building, the limestone from the ledge that the city is built on. W.C. Handy played here. Dred Scott worked here.
No kidding.
So it's got this history for all the way back from the 1880s.
I've seen an old photograph that looks like it from the same angle. Was this done from an old photograph?
Many. There's a lot of old photographs.
I see. And you just put
In
them
fact,
together.
it's really funny. At one time, this area was closed, and there was another entrance over here on the other side.
It's fascinating. Let's take a look at another one.
Okay, now these are a series of pictures from the World's Fair that I recreated when we, let's see, I guess it was 2004 when we were celebrating
The 100th year.
100th anniversary.
The 1904
so
World's Fair.
this is the basin, and
Oops.
this is the sunken garden, and then
That's just beautiful.
this everybody wonders about, of the Ferris wheel. In fact, a lot of people are talking about it. There's stories that this section here was buried right near Skinker, but it's not true. Everything has been taken away.
Right. For years I heard that, people used to search Forest Park
Right,
for
right.
that,
It's
didn't
not
they?
there.
Metal detectors and all that sort of
Right,
thing.
right.
Right. Talk a little bit about the text in your book. David Bauer is a writer who worked with you on this, and he wrote the text. So what did he contribute to this?
Well, what he did, he's a better writer than I am. I'm more of a factual writer. It's not a fun writer. So he took all my information that I did the history of each one and researched everything I could get on, mainly trivia on each one. And so he took the better parts and made it much more interesting to read, and then it flows much better.
Let's take a look at another image from the book. And this is Gaslight Square. Now, you said you've been here since college, so did you experience some of that nightlife?
Oh, yes. The go-go dancers. the three fountains was there. The way that originally started, there was a restaurant bar on Euclid called Europa. And Europa was the first restaurant I'd ever gone into where they had guitar playing in the background. I thought that, wow, that's neat. It's really wonderful. And then later on Olive Street, we had, oh gosh, I've forgotten already. But that became another place where there was entertainment, and then it all moved to Boyle and Olive.
And of course, that's where Jay and Fran Landesman
Right.
held court, and people like
Yes.
Barbara Streisand, the
Yes.
Smothers Brothers, and all
And
those
so
other
I got
people.
to see them
No kidding. Wow.
before they were famous.
Well, the book is Once Upon a Time in St. Louis, and Marilynne Bradley is the artist, and we're going to take a short break and come back and talk more about her work right after this. So just sit here,
Kids will spend 15 minutes watching online videos like this one.
Brushing for 2 minutes now can save your child from severe tooth pain later. 2 minutes twice a day. They have the time.
Experience St. Louis!
I'm Steve Potter. Welcome back to City Corner. Marilynne Bradley is our guest today. She's an artist, and her work is in this book, Once Upon a Time in St. Louis. And Marilynne, you are not originally from St. Louis, although you've been here a long time. I guess you're in the Chicago area originally.
Yes, it was 90 miles west of Chicago. I was only 16 miles from the Wisconsin border, so I was closer to Beloit than I was to Chicago.
So you came down here to go to school at Washington University,
Yes.
and you never left?
No, I loved it here. Surprising enough, when I was here, it's up on campus, I was a cellist. I was in the Philharmonic. Did a lot of things that had to do with St. Louis.
Yeah, and you wanted to be a different kind of, a more technical illustrator.
I was going to become a medical illustrator, so I went into advertising illustration. So it wasn't necessarily the fine art business. Because of that, a lot of people didn't think of me as an artist per se. I was an illustrator. There used to be a difference. Today, they're finally even deciding that Norman Rockwell is an artist, which is good.
You have a couple of other books under your belt. Let's just briefly mention those. I guess this was your first endeavor?
That was one of the first. It's called Borrowed Ideas and Famous First, and it has to do with St. Louis architecture. A lot of the architecture in St. Louis has been borrowed from different areas, like the hotel in Paris, the Louvre. Even you might say the Colosseum in Rome.
Yeah.
So that was the first one. This other one is I did 6 paintings for the book St. Louis Silhouettes by Elizabeth Benoit. She goes all the way back to Shoto. So she has quite a, she's not alive anymore, but that gave her history of the city.
And then you have this book, and it also has an introduction by a friend of mine, and that's Ron Ells. People know him as Johnny Rabbit on the radio, and he's always involved. If somebody's doing something with a local tie, he's interested.
Right. So he did the introduction on this. And so this St. Louis in watercolor is, again, the history of St. Louis in watercolor, although there's a lot of places that are still around. But they're all unique in this particular book, and I did the research on everyone. It has a lot of trivia. And since Johnny Rabbit is into trivia a lot, we had a lot to talk about.
Yes, absolutely. He's done a couple trivia books,
yes,
by the way, also. So after Washington University, I know you've taught in a couple of places. What's your brief bio?
Well, for 28 years I taught at Webster Groves High School. Then after I retired from the high school, I went across the street and I'm now teaching at Webster University. I've taught at the University of Missouri. I give lessons now at the Green Door Gallery on North Gore and Webster. So every Wednesday night I have a class. Anybody can come. They can just drop in and it's just an hour and a half.
No kidding.
Yeah.
I might take you up on that sometime. Let's look at another image from your book, and this is a place I'm not familiar with, although I know a lot of people know about it. It was located in Rock Hill, which is, I guess, just north of
that's
Webster,
the old book house. It's sad that it was torn down. It now has a storage facility there.
Oh, no kidding.
And I mean, it's such a unique, cute little Gothic house.
So it was a bookstore, was it?
It was a bookstore. It was filled. Everything was filled in there.
Oh, one thing about your book, too, is you have different categories where you kind of group things. You do have different sections?
Yes.
How'd you break those down?
It had to do with the past because it starts out with the entertainment, travel, the theater, and good food.
And the book really kind of goes on a progression because you start with some images from like the early frontier days. And
yes.
I think you called Thomas Jefferson and the Louisiana Purchase, I'm maybe rearranging your words a little bit, a genius move or something?
Yes,
right?
Yes.
What do you mean by that?
Well, the thing is, I don't think people realize that this statue of Thomas Jefferson used to be in the middle of the Jefferson Memorial. They've moved it now. I mean, he was the reason that we are here for the Louisiana Purchase. Otherwise, we would never have St. Louis, although St. Louis was here before because of the French.
How important is the history to you as an artist, knowing the background, knowing the history? I mean, I think I can just sense that you enjoy it.
Well, I realize that the present is built on the past. So you have to know the past before you make any of the mistakes that you think you're going to make in the future.
All right, we have 4 images from the book next, 4 of your watercolors, and they're all restaurants of one sort of another. So why don't we look at that, and let's start with a Parkmore, which I bet people that went to high school in the, would it be the 60s?
Yes.
The 60s probably hung out in the parking lot.
Right.
Clayton Road, was that the Clayton Road location?
That's a corner of Clayton and Big Bend.
Yeah.
Well, now it's a Walgreens. But everybody used to go there. It was an all-nighter. So.
And the next one is the Majestic Cafe.
That used to be on Laclede and Euclid, and had Greek food, and there was a place, really a place to hang out, especially one of the few first places to have outdoor eating.
At the Central West End?
Well, it's sort of the Central West End. It's south of the Central West End. It's closer to the hospitals.
And now outdoor eating is, you have to have it.
Right. And I think now, I think it's turned into a barbecue place.
The next one is something people recognize, Duff's.
Well, that's Duff's. Duff's is an icon. That's where you even had poetry reading, you had music, and it was wonderful. The food was fantastic.
And one more, we couldn't have something about St. Louis eateries without this.
This particular White Castle was on Hampton and Chippewa. Then the problem was that there were too many people hanging out, and they didn't want the crowds that are around that, so they tore it down, and it turned into a photo shop where you could just drive through. Now it's just a parking lot.
Boy, so you've been painting for something like 50 years. I hate to keep bringing that up. And there are 86 images in this book. Do you have any idea how many paintings you have actually painted of St. Louis altogether?
Oh gosh, I know it's over 600. I have a website. It's marilynbradley.com, and I list all my paintings that I have for the moment. They're in categories like there's St. Louis, there's some from Central West End, there's some from Alton.
Really?
So it's the whole St. Louis area, and anybody can just see what I have painted.
How important is it to you to be a businesswoman with your art? I guess what I'm asking is, how important is it for you to sell it? Is that high on your priority? Is it just the process of producing it that's important to you? Or?
No, I'm there to sell. I mean, if I just paint, what is going to happen? You just keep getting layers and layers of paintings, and they stay there. So right now I have a house full of paintings, and I'd like to get rid of a few.
Do you find that you get repeat customers? I would think that people that are really into St. Louis and love St. Louis would come back and every once in a while maybe buy something else.
Right. And what I also like to do is I get interested in the subject matter, and then I continue and make a series. So there's a series of painting on the same subject matter. It's like I did the Katy Trail. In fact, I have a show right now at Town and Country Longview Gallery where it shows I went by bicycle from Clinton all the way to St. Charles and painted along the way. There's about 60 paintings in that show.
Wow.
And then I did, in fact, I did a book, but it was never published, called Down River on a Tow. I went from St. Louis to New Orleans and recorded almost everything along the banks all the way down. The book itself was supposed to relate to an 1814 diary of somebody and how the river was almost the same, with the same.
You know, I always think of you correct me, I always think of watercolors being very labor intensive or time intensive, because unlike oils where you can just keep working on it, right? In a watercolor, you might put in a certain color and you've got to wait for it to dry and put another wash over it. So does it take a lot longer?
No, I've come up with my own formula of how to paint. Usually the way I will paint is very different than what most watercolorists will do, is I'll put all the darks and details down first. So it's really a strong composition, and then from there I will put layers of color on top. And I just work from dark to light.
We have this one of Busch Stadium, the old Busch Stadium, I should say, right?
Yep. And then this is the old arena.
Oh my gosh. And of course, weren't the towers, they came off during a tornado,
yes,
1960s or 50s?
Mm-hmm.
Unusual
And
view on that.
Nobody sees this anymore because there's so much structure in front of it, but this is the Lambert Airport.
It's beautiful.
The 66, these are two park drive-ins. This was on Watson, and then this one was on Lindbergh.
Ronnie's.
They're both Wernbergs. We're into theater now. The High Point, you can see the High Point.
Now I remember the Amoco sign, right? The Amoco sign replaced this at some point?
Yes, it used to be a Red Crown, well, here it is, Red Crown. And I remember when these used to be light bulbs. And when the light bulbs went out, somebody had to climb up there and replace them.
You mean the light bulbs made the letters?
Yes.
Right?
No, the whole thing.
Oh, the whole thing, really?
Yeah,
No
so it was
kidding.
almost like a mosaic of light bulbs.
Yeah, I thought that Amoco sign was an icon. I didn't realize there was one before that.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
This is the Shady Oak that was in Clayton. Was a good independent little...
Now I remember, is that not there anymore?
No. So that's gone. This is Cinderella. This was at once a roller rink, and this is on Cherokee.
Okay, now this is one I've never heard of.
They're starting to renovate it. In fact, Cherokee is really being renovated. Right around the corner is, what is it? The one place for dancing. I can't even think of it. That's what happens when you get old.
Out to Casa Loma.
Casa Loma's right around the corner.
Between the two of us, we'll get through this.
Here's another picture of Duff's. I think I did 3 paintings of Duff's.
Huh. Did you tell me, did I understand you correctly, that you weren't really formally trained in watercolor?
No. So I learned this all by myself on how to really execute it.
Did you study other artists, or did you just experiment, or what was your process?
I was at WashU, but my background was in advertising and illustration. And with illustration, you can use more than one media in the picture. You want to get something right away so it's camera ready. So in some respects, I have that background, and I guess that's why I like to work from dark to light. This is California Donuts, and believe it or not, it's coming back. Somebody's bought the building, and they want to bring it back as
Where's
California
that
Donut
located?
Company. It's on Jefferson. And it's the same, it looks the same. This was a franchise, I didn't realize it. And supposedly the donuts are excellent. I've never tasted them before.
We should have brought some today.
Yeah. This is Bissinger's.
Chocolate.
The first Bissinger's. This was the one on McPherson. And it's now moved to Maryland Plaza. So.
Well, do you have, what's your next project? Do you have anything in mind?
Yes, I'm going to do a book on all the restaurants.
On just restaurants?
Restaurants. It's going to be the history of St. Louis restaurants. And the idea is I'm going all the way back to Tony Faust. Some people remember the name of Tony Faust that was in the Southern Hotel. And the way, that'll be the first picture probably. And then move on, like even the Pelican. The Pelican used to be on Kings Highway. And then just keep going up to today's restaurants. Now the reason is that I have to wait a while because the restaurants, the turnover is so much that they have to at least be around for 2 years.
Yeah, some open and shut overnight.
Right. So I'm trying to get the restaurants that have a history and a reputation. And so far, it's going to be in the different areas of St. Louis, like the Central West End, Del Mar, Grand.
How far along are you on that? When do you think that'll come out?
I have 90 paintings already, but there'll probably be about 200. And what I've done is, thank goodness for computers, I've got a scan sheet, and I just list them all, and we'll start putting those together. Won't be ready for another 2 years.
Well, in the meantime, we have this book, Once Upon a Time in St. Louis, an illustrated trip through the past. It's by Marilynne Bradley, and with words by David Bauer, a little history that's woven in there, Reedy Press. And there on the screen, there's more information if you want to go to Reedy Press. I guess it's probably available at good local bookstores too.
Yes, it's at the Left Bank Books. It's at Barnes & Noble. You can get it on Amazon.
All right.
Almost anywhere.
Well, Marilynne Bradley, thank you so much for sharing your beautiful work with us today. I appreciate it.
Well, thank you for having me.
Once Upon a Time, St. Louis. I'm Steve Potter. That's all the time we have for this edition of City Corner. Thanks for being here, and I hope you'll join us next time. Bye.